Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. We have a special edition today. Logan Landers is our producer and engineer, and our founder and host is Vincent Turner. And Vincent, we've got royalty in the house. If you want to talk about Jackie Wayne Sherrill and all that he did to change college football and the game of football itself, it's an honor for us to have him. And I'm going to start with you, Vincent. When you've got someone like Jackie who's won 4 national championships, 2 as a player, 2 as a coach, we're going to have to just get out of the way and let him do all the talking today.
I'm going to say this. There's a young man out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that was a great jazz musician by the name of George Benson. He had this saying. He said, "The neon lights are bright on Broadway. They say there's always magic in the air." I'm proud. I'm excited. We're in a great, great moment right now because we got one of the top 5 coaches in all of college football. So back to you, Hawk.
Well, it is an honor to have you. Jackie, you're a young kid in Duncan, Oklahoma, an oil town, lots of farms and all that. Most people would say, I'm going to go in the oil business. I'm going to learn how to do it myself, or I'm going to go into farming. I'm going to learn how to operate a tractor and a trailer by the time I'm 13. But athletics and sports ends up being your way out, isn't it?
Well, it certainly was. Like a lot of us, growing up, you had choices to either be over here, which was running the streets, or be over here, which you're in as an athlete, taking up your time from over here. So I was fortunate to be able to get in and start playing at a very young age. And, we all want to be accepted. So, which group are you accepted? I was accepted by the coaches and players, teammates. So that's where, my affirmation was. And it's not different than a lot of kids today. Some of the greatest players I ever had coached, I had to make those decisions. And, there are a couple that actually were in the game that had to make the decision to get out, get off the street and be a part of, a team and be a part of playing football.
Well, absolutely. And football being one of those. Were you a baseball player too? Everybody played baseball when they were a kid. And are there any guys that you can say that, I still have a relationship with, or, one of my first teammates, whether it be football, basketball, baseball?
Unfortunately, all of them are passed.
Yeah.
But there was one kid, our teammate called Billy Pennington, and we were the biggest kids in the 4th grade. And I remember the first day the coach put us against each other, and he didn't come back for a while. He didn't come back till next year. So, but baseball, basketball, you played, if you played all sports.
Yes. Yeah. And did they have the Oklahoma drill back then, or was that after Bud Wilkinson?
No, they had all drills back then, 7-on-7 Oklahoma, 1-on-1. Yeah, we can't do those today.
And growing up just a little bit north of the Red River, I think that would be, an aspiration for a young boy, especially, you were born in 1943. So by the early to mid 60s, late 50s, Oklahoma was it in terms of college football. What was that like for you, either going to games or listening on the radio and the aura that was around at that time about Oklahoma football?
Well, back then you had like 5 or 8 teams that were on the TV. They were the only ones on. In the radio and living in Oklahoma, you had Oklahoma. They had the 48-game winning streak. Then they go to Notre Dame, and that's who broke it when they played Notre Dame after winning 48 in a row. I was going to Oklahoma. Most kids that at that time growing up, they wanted to go play for Bud Wilkinson. Coach Wilkinson, had some great players and won a lot of games.
You got a chance to meet him a little bit later, I would imagine, right? With his doing ABC games, right? I think he was with Keith Jackson for a while and some of the other greats that were a part of those broadcasting days.
Well, I was recruited by Oklahoma, so I almost went there. but another coach by the name of Coach Bryant uh, took that away from him. He came down and they were going to the Sugar Bowl my senior year. They came to Biloxi, and he came down to see the facilities to train and talked to me and another player, my teammate, Lynn Patterson, for over an hour to almost 2 hours. Never asked me to come. And, he was different, talked about Alabama, talked about the players. But of all the other coaches, he was completely different. And so that's where I was changed my mind to go. But back then, you had two conferences that were joined. That was the old SEC and the ACC. They had an agreement that they would have an early sign-in date, and that was in December. And then you had your national letter, which was later. So even though I signed with Alabama, ACC could not recruit me, but Oklahoma still could.
Okay.
And Oklahoma still recruited all the way up to the national letter. And I remember that I was going to go visit Oklahoma. I called the coach that recruited me, Coach Hennessy, and said, I'm going to go visit Oklahoma. He didn't tell me not to, but then when I hung up, started thinking, I'm not going to Oklahoma. I'm going to go to Alabama. So there's no need for me to even go visit. So I called Oklahoma and said I wasn't going to visit. I was going to go to Alabama.
Now, you had mentioned that you were in Biloxi at the time. Talk a little bit about that transition. Family moves, right? And is it your dad had a different job opportunity? What brought you to Biloxi?
My brother, older brother, there were 8 in the family, 4 boys, 4 girls. I was the youngest. And so he had a chicken farm, egg farm. So my mother was getting remarried, and I was the only boy in the home for a long time, only male. I said, no, I'm not sharing it. So I went to live with my brother and worked on the chicken farms. We had 8,500 laying hens, from baby chicks, 3 days old, all the way up to laying hens, and supplied eggs up and down the coast of Mississippi.
Jackie, that's a gold mine today, but that's another story. We'll save that. But you end up moving with your brother.
Ours was 5 cents an egg.
Well, it's 20 times that now. It's amazing. Yeah. But we'll digress with that. High school. When were you of high school age, and then going from Oklahoma? It's hard to leave your friends and all that, but they still knew about you, didn't they? Oklahoma did. The Sooners still wanted to recruit you. But
in between my freshman and sophomore year, but they had me on their radar as a 9th grader. And so when I went to Biloxi as 10th, 11th, 12th, they still recruited me.
Did the heat and humidity of South Mississippi, did that get your attention there, that first couple of summers that you were down in Biloxi?
Well, being able to go on the beach and being able to get in the water, you didn't think about that as a young kid. Today we may, but not back then.
Basketball, baseball, was that a part of your high school career as well?
Yeah, well, ran track. I did track. Well, I did track, basketball, football. I didn't do baseball.
Gotcha. So you worked on your speed a little bit. Was that advantageous in terms of, I got to get faster or stay faster. It should help my football. You see a lot of kids today, coaches will encourage them to play another sport and hopefully have it add to their athleticism.
Instead of going the other way, I went from the 100 to 200 to 400 to 800 to the mile.
So track slowed you down is what you're telling me.
Well, it didn't slow me down, but I had probably the reason they put me there. I could run for a long time.
There you go. That's important, right? And describe that, not the first meeting, but when you got to visit with Bear Bryant and the other staff members. Obviously, he had a great group of guys around him. But what impressed you about the school when you went there? They played half their games in Legion Field back then. Did you get to go to Legion as well during that
It
recruiting
was
process?
homecoming for the official visit. It was homecoming. So you got to see the pageantry of, sororities, fraternities, and certainly watching. But, Coach Bryant took me to church. He had the wrong scouting report somehow, but, he took me to church. Either that he thought I needed to go, or he felt, or somebody told him I was very religious. But anyway, Coach Bryant took me to church by himself.
What an interesting time that must have been there. During the service, lots of different things are going through my mind that you would want to talk to him, but you can't quite do that. Were you quiet as a church mouse, or were you very comfortable?
You don't say very much around Coach Bryant unless he asks you a question.
Okay. Well, you get to Alabama. Back in those days, you couldn't play as a freshman. I'm sure you studied and hit the books with great vigorosity, didn't you? But they did have. There was a freshman team. Did you get 4, 5, 6 games maybe in the year?
4 games. Freshman team, you played 4 games, and and even back then you had freshmen all SEC and freshman recognition, but you couldn't play. And back then you could substitute only 2 people on first and fourth down. Second, third, you could substitute as many. And that's how the Chinese Bandits got started at LSU, because they were strictly a pure defensive team that they would go in when the opponent was on offense. So that they had they had actually 3 teams. They had their first team offense, their go team, then they had their Chinese Bandits defensive team, and then they had a team that was a mixture of all. At that time, you played both ways. So usually in the lineup, fullbacks were fullback linebackers, centers were centers linebackers, guards were defensive tackles, ends were the defensive ends, and then running backs and receivers were defensive backs. You substituted, and usually the one person that you substituted was the quarterback. Coach Bryant, I only saw Joe play defense one time when he got upset at him and he pointed at him to stay on the field. So
he flipped him around and just did it once. Joe played a little bit of safety.
The only time I ever saw him play defense.
Well, Chuck Bednarik obviously was the last of the Mohicans in terms of the NFL game, but like you said, that was a commonplace during the mid to late 60s, obviously in the college ranks. Tell me what it was like going in some of those spaces where during those 4 games or in your sophomore year, you get to go to LSU, you get to go to Mississippi State or to Oxford, you play against Georgia. There were some amazing places that you got to be a part of in terms of the SEC's the scenery and the great tradition that was going on there.
Well, we played everybody, Mississippi State, you played Auburn, you played Tennessee, Georgia, Vanderbilt. We did not play LSU or Mississippi, because at that time, LSU, Mississippi, and Alabama, we were going to a bowl game. And so they did not play. Well, Coach Bryant didn't play Mississippi or LSU because it would take one of us out of the higher position to go to a bowl game. Back then, you had your sugar, your orange, your cotton, and your rose. Those were the games that you went to. And, fortunate, all the years that I was at Alabama, we went to the sugar twice, and we went to the orange. I stayed as a GA and went to the orange twice the years that I was there.
And you didn't have 35 different bowl games like they do now. You only had a couple, and the Gator would come a little bit later. But for obvious reasons, that sophomore year, you get a chance to play. You mentioned Joe Namath being on that team. Before the air, you had Leroy Jordan. I mean, what was that like for you, realizing one day you're sitting in a dorm room going, I'm in a place right now that there are guys that are going to be pros very, very soon. I can learn from them and hopefully enhance my game by watching what these guys do.
Well, I wish I'd been that smart back then. But, when you don't realize it until later, and, being able to go into the coaching field, then you realize it a lot more because, Namath and Leroy, I mean, they're players then that were great players. Kenny Stabler, I mean, you go on and on, that were not average athletes and not average players. We talk about, 4 and 5 stars today. Those guys back then would have been 6 or 7 stars because, they were such great athletes even back then. And they could play all sports. Kenny was a great baseball player. Joe could play baseball or basketball.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the names. Was there an aha moment for you where you're on the sideline and whether you're at home or on the road? For me, it was Tennessee. My second game as a collegiate was at Tennessee in Knoxville, and the topography of that campus and the night lights, and then the amount of people that were in the stands. Was there a moment like that for you? Go, this is a heck of a lot better than it was in Duncan, Oklahoma, or in Biloxi. I'm in a cathedral of college football.
Playing in Legion Field, so we played in a big stadium, but playing in Tennessee, Tennessee was without a doubt the loudest. Even back then. And then when I started coaching at Mississippi State and really understanding that they had PV speakers on the sidelines, and well, go back to Pittsburgh. They had PV speakers. Those are the big rock band speakers.
Yep.
On the visitor side, they were going through the bench to the field. On the home field, they were going through the stands. So there was no way that you could hear the band play Rocky Top over the people singing without induced music. So they induced the music, put the speakers in the band section. So when we went to play them, Coach Majors was the coach, play them in Pittsburgh in 1977 or 78. And I gave our security guy a pair of wire cutters, and I told him to cut the speaker wires on our sideline, which he did. And of course, they fixed them, and so I told him to cut them right before kickoff. So, and one other thing I did back then, they'd always, even today, they'll let the visiting team go out first, and then the home team because of the crowd noise. Well, I refused to go out because I wanted to go out the same time Tennessee did, because there's 100,000 people. I didn't want to hear the boos.
No.
So you can't boo and cheer at the same time.
That's right. They're only then, and you can say they're cheering for us, but the wire cutters, that's classic. That's smarts. You don't say you're not a smart man. You learned your lesson well. Which rivalry affected you the most? Was it Tennessee? I know that was one that the two states still have a disdain for one another. I get it. It's college football. I'm going to be very politically correct there, but saying, on the athletic field on a Saturday, what is it, the third Saturday in October, all bets are off. Which rivalry meant the most to you?
Well, for Coach Bryant, he had Tennessee, Georgia, Auburn. Those were the three. And then we played LSU my junior year.
Okay.
And then going to Pittsburgh, certainly it was West Virginia, Penn State. And then at Mississippi State, it was Mississippi and Alabama. And then at A&M, of course, it was University of Texas.
Yeah.
So those were, every sector has the rival teams that you really, and Coach Bryant got up for the rival teams.
Okay.
When we were playing somebody that we were going to beat or should beat, he wasn't as intense as he was against Auburn or Tennessee or Georgia or LSU.
The business of the game has changed dramatically, but understanding that, my alumni need to be able to say that we beat their alumni, that's existed for a long time. Did any of that cross over into while you were playing before you were coaching, where you sensed that, not only is this a bigger game because Coach Bryant is saying it is, but you read it in the paper and they're talking about it on the radio stations, and you just know it amongst the student body when you go to class. This one means a little bit more.
But today, because of social media, it's a lot stronger. So your rival games today are much bigger, meaning through the media, than they were back then, because all you had was the newspaper, and the radio. Very few students back then listened to radio. We didn't have talk radio, and so you only had the games. But the alumni, the ones that couldn't go, they only had the radio, and they listened. That's how the old broadcasters, meaning back then, became very, very huge in the radio world, because they all listened to them on Saturday calling the games.
Yeah. And you win 2 national championships while you were there, and most of the folks couldn't see it. The TV rights by ESPN didn't exist, right? ESPN didn't come around until the late 70s, early 80s. But from a media perspective, you guys were it, right? Was there times where you'd go on the road and especially later in the year, maybe against Auburn or another big opponent, and you realize, man, this is a lot bigger. This is a national level bowl game here that I would never have thought just a few months ago when you're in Biloxi that you get to be a part of all that.
Well, you didn't, as players, you were part, but we didn't have the social media that we have today. So it wasn't as big, we just got ready to play. But yes, we were excited to play Auburn. We were excited to play Georgia or Tennessee. But Coach Bryant made sure we got up and got excited for those games. I remember my sophomore year, we're getting ready to open up with Georgia, and we're playing Tennessee in Birmingham. And on Friday workout, Coach Bryant said, if we have to play, after we went through all the assignments and called this up, he says, this is my sophomore year, he said, if we have to play Sherrill a lot, we'll get our ass beat. And so the only thing he knew what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. And that's all I thought about from that point on, is beating Tennessee. I didn't think about anything else, just over and over beat Tennessee. So Coach Bryant had, being able to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist, he knew what to say to a player at the right time.
You mentioned that it's really important. And Vincent, I'll let you take over for you. Just some people don't know how interactive with few words that Bear Bryant was. His ability to manipulate, maneuver, and some call him mean. And I know the Junction Boys make him out to look to be a bad guy, but Bill Curry told me once, he said, there's nothing about that movie that really is true, except for the fact that he was a master psychologist in terms of understanding how he could motivate players and coaches and get the most out of them. Can you comment a little bit on that?
Well, the practice and the things that I took from him, and most of the players did that became coaches, practice has to be harder than the game. If practice is not, and that's even in everybody's life, if you don't practice and you just go do your job, you may not do that job very well. So as a player, our practices were very tough. And, I always remember Coach Bryant would go out on the field sometimes 10 minutes, 15 minutes earlier than practice, go out by himself. But when we were sitting on some concrete benches, and if he walked by and he was humming "We Shall Gather at the River," we knew we didn't want to go to practice because it was not. So what he was doing was telling us going out to the practice field, you better get ready because it won't be very nice practice.
Did he have the tower back then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And we didn't have water breaks now. We'd go through the whole practice without water breaks.
You better hydrate beforehand if you knew any better, right? Goodness gracious. Yeah. Different times than today. Vincent, I've taken most of the conversation. Please.
Coach Sherrill, your time at Alabama, I got a couple of questions for you. What was it like playing with all the great players? You mentioned some earlier, but Paul Crane, Richard Cole, Dickie Thompson. Yes, sir. No problem. Yeah. Lewis Thompson and Jerry Duncan. And then my second question, take us back to the 64 Orange Bowl. Did Joe Woolley get in the end zone or did he not? Then finally, your senior year, y'all won the national championship that season. Y'all went 9-1-1, but y'all lost that game to Georgia to open the season on the flea flicker play, which looked like the Georgia player knee was on the ground. Then y'all go through the schedule and y'all play that mighty Nebraska team. And Nebraska, if I'm recollect, outweighed y'all a lot on the defense and offensive lines. But what I took from it, and I was watching some film from that game the other night, that was a gentleman from Duncan, Oklahoma that had 6 tackles in that game at the linebacker position that I'm looking at right now. And y'all won that football game 39-28. And my man from Cleveland, Tennessee, Steve Sloan, put on the show. 290 yards, and Ray Perkins went under 159 yards. Now, I know I asked you a lot, but I'm excited. So I'm going to go back to all those players that you played with and then take us to the Orange Bowl the Orange Bowl.
Yeah. Well, I wish that back then, like I said, that I knew how great these players were, like Namath or Stabler. You'd go on. And just my roommate was Steve Sloan. I roomed with Paul Crane, Steve Sloan, and some other Steve Bowman. They all went and had great careers, but, there was some that were very, very special. And certainly Leroy was, Joe was, and Kenny was. They were not average players. And so you got to play with the players, but Coach Bryant could take a player that was average and make him better, take a good player and make him excellent, but an excellent player and make him great. He had that ability to change your own perception of your own self. But going back to some of the games, Nebraska, in which we played, they had a great football team. And, they had light horse Harry Wilson, which was one of the running backs that was really outstanding. But we played, and it may have been the first time that it was integrated, that Alabama actually played an integrated team. They all say go back to Southern Cal, but that was the team that came into Legion Field. We played in the Orange Bowl against Nebraska. Great football team, but we had a little more speed than they did, meaning quickness and speed. We were not their size. But again, having the ability to play on those teams, some of the things we talked about, making some tackles. It was 3rd and 1, and I scrape off and make the tackle on light horse Harry Wilson and put him out of the game. I hurt his shoulder. So, coaches were jumping up and down on the sideline that, I made a big play.
I love it. And then obviously Bear had to reevaluate and go, hey, if Sherrill's in the game, we're not in big trouble. He's going to make some big plays. I'm sure that boosts your confidence and all that going into your senior year. As Vincent was asking about some of the great players and plays and games that you were a part of. What was your mindset there? Because this is national championship time, and this is when Alabama is, you win 2 championships back to back. And really, while you were a grad assistant, we talked about the missing.
Yeah, should have won 3.
No kidding.
Michigan State, Notre Dame tied 10-10.
Okay. Now, how do you feel about that? We've talked about this a little bit. It's called The Missing Ring. There's been books written about it and all that other stuff. Give us your standpoint, Jackie. Where are you in this particular situation? You should have a 3rd ring, right?
Yes, it was no question. You're the only undefeated team in the country, and you couldn't go against the schedule that you played. And because back then, the same thing, LSU, Auburn, Tennessee, Georgia, they were Florida, they were still great football teams.
We've got a picture of that tie at Notre Dame. That's not a win. That's a tie.
Yes.
Right. So even though they didn't have any losses, you didn't have any ties. You were undefeated, untied. And
we played Nebraska in the Sugar Bowl.
Yep.
That year.
Now if I remember correctly, both the Heisman Trophy and the national championship was awarded prior to the bowl games. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, that was because the year before Alabama won it, but we lost the game with Texas in the Orange Bowl. So it was still, but after it changed, and they changed it to after the playing season, which they should.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. 74 is when the Heisman Trophy vote changed as well. So just interesting things, the way the game has developed. You're done with your career. You've played, and it's time to move on. When did you say, I kind of like this coaching thing. I want to stick around and be a part of this great game. But even though I can't do it from a player standpoint, I get this. When did that happen for you?
Well, it was never. I was started my master's at Alabama in business, and then I went to Arkansas to finish my master's to coach Broyles.
Okay.
But I wasn't going into coaching. I was in the business, going into the business world. And Coach Majors got the job at Iowa State, and I walked in and asked him if I could go because I was married, had a young child, and I just walked in and says, "Can I join your staff?" And he looked at me and he said, "Well, what can you coach?" And I said, "Coach, if you're a coach, you can coach anything."
Yeah.
So he hired me, and that's how I got started into coaching. If he had not gone to Iowa State at that time, I probably wouldn't have got into coaching.
Really? Wow. And what was Frank Broyles like? I know that many people say that he's in the top 5 as an icon in terms of a coach, and then obviously as the athletic director, some amazing success that he was able to bring. As Vincent knows, go ahead.
Coach Bryant is a man's man. Everything you want in a man, he was. Even though he was very large, he's 6'4", weighed 2+, very physical, but he had tons of compassion. He did things for people that no one ever knew or would ever find out.
Yeah.
Coach Broyles was probably the best business guy. Extremely well in business. He raised a lot of money, got a lot of the people in Arkansas to donate. He got Reynolds to give $20 million back to enlarge their stadium. And, the money from Reynolds was supposed to be to 4 states in that corner for education and other things. But Coach Broyles could do that. And then Coach Majors was probably the best PR guy. He could meet you 14 years later and tell you where he met you, what you talked about, and maybe what you were wearing. So I had the opportunity to be around some, of the best in the field, and all three of them did different things. Although Coach Bryant was a true businessman, his schedule every day, he was up at 5 o'clock, and he had 4 o'clock. He had breakfast at 5 o'clock at the Holiday Inn, and then he went to his office at 6. Had a staff meeting at 7. Then at 10:30, he would walk down 1 block to a drugstore, Druid City, have some coffee or whatever. And then from 11:30 to 1 or 11:30 to 12:30, he was in the stock market and did all of his business ventures. Coach Bryant was very wealthy all the way back in 1950s when he was at Texas A&M.
Yeah, I've heard and read about some of his financial moves, and that's an interesting facet. What part of those things? Oh, first of all, let's go back. Did you have to stand up with both hands in the air and yell "pig, suey"? Because I know that Vincent wants to make sure that you did that at least once in your life with all the emotion that is a part of the state of Arkansas.
Yeah, Vincent, going from most of the games were in Little Rock.
Yes, sir. Little Rock Memorial Stadium.
Yeah, so if you went from Fayetteville, you went south to Fort Smith and then across now you could go through the hills, the shortcut. So we played, I drove down and I'm driving back, but I'm taking the shortcut. I'm out of gas.
Oh.
So I stopped in this town. They had maybe 2 gas, and I was going, and I was draining. They were closed. I was draining the pumps in my car just to get gas. And fortunately, all of a sudden the lights went on in one where they actually slept in their house was there at the station, and the guy turned the pump on for me. I would have been stuck in between Fayetteville and Little Rock. Although Little Rock, of all the places I played and coached, Little Rock was the hardest to play. And even though it wasn't very big, but it was extremely loud.
People were on top of you because the stadium went around. It was like everybody is on top of you. And it was next. One thing people don't realize, it was inside the Arkansas Fairgrounds, and the stadium was next door to the zoo. A lot of people don't understand that. But that was the home field advantage. And when you got all those people, and see, it was the stadium when I was there seated about 50,000. But like I say, the seats went around. They didn't go up. It was like a ball, just everybody on top of you.
Yeah, no, it was loud. I hated to play at a Little Rock.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, if you couldn't get some gas, you could probably get a bottle of a gallon jug with 3 X's on it that might be more fuel than you would need to get your car moving. Right there,
Well, Vincent will know this. When I was at Arkansas, I went. There was a lake in the Ozarks, but anyway, I went to the lake. We were out there and drinking some beer. Out of beer. As I said, where's the closest place? They said like 5 miles. So I get in my car and I go, and it's in the woods. But they had a porch all the way around, and they had 3 or 4 guys, maybe more, on the rocking chairs just rocking. When I walked in, all those eyes go, look at me. When I walk out, I was glad, and I wasn't going back.
That was the town you're talking about is Springdale right now. That's kind of Springdale now has like almost 250,000 people.
Yeah.
But I heard the story about Springdale back in the day. And most of all, when you look at it, we used to say when I was in school, Coach Sherrill, when you was going up to Fayetteville, I was going up from I-40 West.
Yeah.
Going through Little Rock, Conway, Bentonville, Russellville, And then you get to that little highway, I think it's 48, where you go up through Solomon Springs.
Oh, yes.
They used to have this saying about pig suey: one way in, one way out.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, we played the worst game I probably ever coached was when we were at A&M. We go to Fayetteville. I didn't do my homework because you couldn't stay in Fayetteville as a opponent. You either had to go up to the resort or go to Tulsa. So we went to the resort. But at the resort, the players were all in different cabins. And I agreed to play an early game, which was dumb. And so we had the 11 o'clock kickoff. So that meant your players had to eat by 7. And so you're up at 5 because it was an hour and a half drive back. So we had this place that we were going to stop and have breakfast. So it was dark. Players get on the bus. We stop at this pancake place. They did not have enough people to serve the players.
Oh boy.
So now we had some players that didn't eat. We are on the bus, and it's cold, it's raining, it's sleet, and a little snow. And we were, at that time, they were running the option. Well, we were prepared to play the option, and we put the quarterback out. They put in a throwing quarterback, and we couldn't stop it. And that's the first time at halftime I had nothing to say because we couldn't stop it. And we got beaten pretty bad.
So y'all stayed over in Tulsa that night?
No. We stayed up at the resort, Fort
Smith?
Yeah, but the one an hour up the resort.
Okay.
I don't remember the name of it, but no, we stayed and it was a bad move by me. I didn't do my homework.
Yeah, those 11 o'clock games, they're great for TV for whatever reason, but they're not great to play in or be a part of unless you want to get home. The trip to get out there, it's a sacrifice. A lot of things that you mentioned, Johnny Majors and some of the other coaches, and Frank Broyles, obviously Bear Bryant. I've always said that you when you coach, you take little bits and pieces from what others have given you, and then you try to apply it to what you are in your personality. Was there any of that in terms of whether it be high school or things that Bear said, or obviously, the other influencing people that have been a part of your life, that you catch yourself every now and again, oh, that's something that Bear Bryant would have said. That's something Johnny Majors would have done. And now I'm doing it with these kids.
Well, I probably practiced like we did at Alabama.
Okay.
When I joined Coach Majors, he allowed me to be in charge of the discipline. So I was always disciplining the players. Even as a head coach, I did the discipline. I didn't have any of the assistant coaches to do it. And so I learned, what's the best way to get a player's attention. And the same thing where you don't hurt them, meaning, people back then, you'd run stadium stairs, you do all kinds of things. Well, you may do it too long and actually wear the player down. So sure. I was smart enough not to do those. But in one of the things that I did do, there's Coach Majors, was make the players roll. And that wasn't going to hurt them, but it would get them sick. And I would stop whenever they got sick. But they could come back and practice 2 hours later or whatever, because it wasn't physical. But I did have a couple of times, and I said, well, I made them do too many things. And so I changed that. But I disciplined the players. I didn't let any of the assistant coaches do the discipline.
My understanding is that Paul Bear Bryant did the same thing, right? He was the disciplinarian. He's the one who said, Joe Namath, you're not going to play in this bowl game because you were out with the boys Was Johnny Majors, was he the disciplinarian, or was there someone else that got to be the Turk, who whether it be a coordinator or another person on the staff?
Well, he allowed me to discipline the players.
Okay.
So I was Coach Majors, and I handled all of it, even at Iowa State when we first went there, and as well as Pittsburgh.
Okay. Now you're not very. You didn't get invited to the party or to Thanksgiving because of that on a lot of occasions. There was a gap and a separation. Everybody knew that you were the guy. You had the badge.
Well, the players, as a coach, and same thing with you two guys, you can't tell me when you were in grade school or junior high school or even in high school, any of the teachers that were nice to you. You can name every one of them that was not nice and made you do things you didn't want to do. And
Okay.
the same thing in the coaching world.
Yep.
You don't remember the nice coaches. You remember the coaches that made you do things that you didn't want to do. And all of a sudden, it helped you accomplish things you never thought you could. And, that was Coach Bryant. He pushed you so hard that he made you a lot better than you ever thought you could be. So those certainly that you took from Coach Bryant as a player. Coach Majors was a great PR guy, and he really handled the press extremely well. I didn't really learn that early in my career, but later, you got that opportunity. But Coach Majors was the best person in the media.
Well, you were with him at Iowa State for quite a while and become his defensive coordinator. Talk a little bit about that in terms of now I'm going to learn at least this side of the ball. And how did that prep you for your head coaching positions later on? You obviously were at Iowa State for a while. Then you were at Pitt as an assistant there before you got the Washington State job. And you paid the price. In other words, you did your time and got to learn not only the position as a coordinator, but how to manage things, right? All that to help prepare you for becoming the head coach someday.
Well, as a player at Alabama, I played 7 different positions.
Wow. Okay.
Wow. And Coach Bryant, I always joke and say he was just trying to find me a place to play, but not really. We lose our 2 tight ends. This was my junior year in fall camp. And he never would come to the rooms, players' rooms. But all of a sudden, he walks in my room on a Monday night. And, I'm scrambling. Coach Bryant looks at me and says, "Can you play tight end?" I said, "Yes, sir, I'll try." He said, "Hell, I know you'll try. Can you play the damn thing?" I wouldn't say no. So I said, "Yes, sir, I can play it." So that's when I started my playing linebacker and tight end my junior year. But as Coach Majors, I went from the B team coach, and there were Larry Lacewell was the defensive coordinator. Jimmy Johnson was the defensive line coach. Larry leaves, and then Jimmy becomes the DC, defensive coordinator. But we were getting ready to play BYU, and Larry asked me to coach the linebackers because how much BYU was throwing the football.
Yep.
And he knew that I could, from playing linebacker, could coach, pass defense. So I did that week, and our linebackers intercepted 2 passes against BYU.
How about that?
So he had me coach the linebackers for the rest of that year. And then the next year, Larry left. Jimmy was the DC. I was the linebacker coach. And then Jimmy leaves and goes to Clemson, and I become defensive coordinator. So, in 3 years, I was B team coach to linebacker to DC to assistant head coach.
quite a progression there. Real quick, go ahead, Vincent. Yes.
Real quick, Coach Sherrill, your time at Iowa State, y'all had a lot of success under Coach Majors, and y'all lost the 1972 Liberty Bowl in an outstanding game against Georgia Tech. But I always want to ask this question: what was it like coaching Matt Blair?
Oh, Matt Blair, great player. Came out of a junior college, and Matt actually played free safety. And Matt, 6'4", could run. And we're playing Colorado. And back then, we're playing an 8-man front. And Matt actually intercepted an out playing 8 technique. Great player. And he went on and had a great career at Minnesota. I had a German Shepherd, and he fell in love with the German Shepherd, so I gave it to him. And so he kept it till the dog passed. But Matt was a great player, great person, and I had a lot of fun coaching him.
And what about these two free? Excuse me, I'm sorry, Hop.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
These two free spirit players back in the day, Mr. Otto Stone and a young man from West Memphis, Arkansas, Ike Harris.
Well, both of those were, that's when we actually at Iowa State, we started because we had Southern coaches. We actually started recruiting players out of the South.
Okay.
So you look at Otto Stowe, you look at Harris, and we had great success because Otto Stowe and Harris were great players. Went off and, matter of fact, Westfield and Otto was on the Miami team, undefeated Miami team, and Warfield. So they were not going to. The defense was covering Warfield, so Otto was catching a lot of passes for Miami back then as well. But excellent players, and these were kids out of the South. We went to Miami, recruited because Joe Avizzano was from Miami, and most of us were from the South. But Otto, he coached at Washington State. I hired him at Washington State, and he would bring the receivers out 2 hours before game time and do all kinds of stretching, do all kinds of drills with them. But the receivers never had to come out of the game. They could play the whole 60 minutes and never in running takeoffs or whatever. They were in that great of a shape. But he also did a lot of stretching with them. But he was probably the best receiver coach I ever had. And he ended up training pro receivers and defensive backs.
And your time at Washington State, a lot of people don't know this, but this gentleman, I think the only year you was there, he threw for like almost 3,000 yards, and somebody
Thompson, the throwing.
There you go, the throwing Samoan.
Yeah, Jack went my spring. Jack was a backup player, and first time I saw him throw in spring practice, I walked up to him, and because he could throw the ball so damn hard, and he didn't know how to not have a throwing motion, and he would change that to take whoever coached him, made him change his throwing motion to take some of the spin or the speed off the ball. And it was kind of like you're pulling the trigger, pulling that rope, because you're not letting the ball go. And so I went up to him in spring practice and I said, Jack, we're going to run it out, and I want you to knock the receiver out of bounds. And he did. And I said, that's your throwing motion. Don't ever change it. The only thing you want to change is you're going to change the grip of the ball a little when you're throwing underneath crossing routes. But, as far as that's your throwing motion.
Back to you, Hawk.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. They were 3-8. I want to say that Jim Sweeney was the head coach. He gets fired, And what was that interviewing process like for you? You'd been the coordinator there at Iowa State and at Pitt, and it was time. Did you have the blessings first and foremost from Johnny to go take that job? And second, now you're on your own, and you got to put a staff together, and you did very quickly. But talk a little bit about that process for you.
Well, there's probably three things I did, which was good. When I went to interview, the AD actually had offered the job to one of the assistants at UCLA.
Okay.
And then he leaves and goes to Honolulu the next year, Hawaii.
Okay.
But in between, I guess the committee, I was the committee's choice. So that's how I got the job. But I said, I will come, and take the job. I will come, but you can't release it until after we play in the Sun Bowl. So no one knew, the players didn't know, you couldn't do that today, but no one knew that I was going to Washington State. And Coach Majors told the staff before the game, the Sun Bowl, playing Kansas. And then after the game, I told the players. And the only one not the only one, but one that I was really concerned about was Tony Dorsett, because when I recruited Tony, I said, Tony, I'll be there for your career. And but he came to my room afterwards and said, I understand, and congratulated, good luck. There were some players that gave me their helmets, and as a parting present. But it wasn't easy, but I got to go for that year. And when I go talk in corporate settings, there's one thing. At that time, Lou Tice was one of the major speakers, motivational speakers in the country. And he came up with the slogan, Big Team, Little Me. And so he had started in the athletic world. He had come into Washington State that spring with the players. And the players that fall, first 3 games, they're 3-0. But the next 8, they go 0-8. So Coach Sweeney got the 0-8, and Lou Tice got the 3-0 credit.
Okay, I didn't know that. All right, yeah.
So that's how I got that job, was because of Coach Sweeney getting the credit for going 0-8.
Well, you don't want that credit, but I got my my shirt here. Now I hear that Washington, at least Pullman and the Spokane area like that. I know Al, what was Marquette's basketball coach? He was on once with
Al McGuire.
Al McGuire was on with Dick Enberg. He said Pullman, Washington is where elephants go to die. It was just a different spot. But
there was no hotel. There was one restaurant when I went there.
How about that? Yeah. Good. You got to go to Moscow or some other place, go to Idaho.
Go to Spokane, or you go to Idaho. Yeah. Which, it's only 7 miles apart.
There's Al back in the day. The experience, though, it was the Pac-8 back then, right? Of getting to go against and having to prep against SC, and UCLA had a heck of a roster back in those days. So either of those two, Stanford, Cal, then of course the Apple Cup. There are some pretty monumental tasks in front of you to improve that. But you met the challenge as best as you could, with the exception of Jack Thompson and Edmond, your tight end. There wasn't a whole lot of talent there, but your job was to bring some other guys in and try to turn this around. You had a 3-8 record there, right?
Yeah.
What were some of your takeaways from that experience that helped make you a better coach the following year when you go to Pittsburgh and then beyond that?
Well, when I took the job with the AD, I said, if you'll promise to give me a chance to win, I'll keep all the records. I'll keep the cost of recruiting, because you had to go to Southern California or California to recruit. So
Yes.
that's a long ways from Pullman, Washington, and which I did. And then I hired one of the GAs off the UCLA staff. Well, he had the recruiting of USC and UCLA, and so and had their recruiting list of the top 30 kids. And I went after, or we went after from 30 below. And we were able to get 4 or 5 kids that UCLA and at USC were recruiting that we were able to get that ended up being all conference, and a couple of them ended up having a great pro career. So we brought in the players to start the base of Washington State. But, fast forward, one of my good friends was Mike Leach that came into Washington State and had a great, so I always kid Mike. I said, "You've been following me around. You went to Washington State, and then you went to Mississippi State."
Doing a good job of cleaning up after that. But you bring up a very interesting point, because there are thousands of 3-star guys that are a half inch too short or 0.2 of a second too slow to play at the elite level. But they'll go through a wall for you, won't they, Jackie? They want to play so badly, and they just want an opportunity. And for you at that level, meaning the Washington State level at that time, to be able to find a diamond in the rough, a kid that you don't know if he's he's reached his athletic peak. Yeah. And there's another guy that no, this guy hasn't even started yet. He's raw. He's probably a year or 2 behind. Wait for him, and he will mature into something that he will be spectacular. Your ability to recognize that, and your assistant coaches, talk a little bit about how important that is.
Well, if you're at Washington State, you're at Mississippi State, you have to do a better job in those universities. You have to do a better job of evaluating. And, at Washington State, you have to go to the junior college as well. But you have to develop the players. And, when you talk about the best, and I'm talking about the feeling as the coach of being able to evaluate and recruit a 3-star, and that all of a sudden that 3-star becoming a 5-star. Yep. And being a high draft choice, having a pro career of 10, 12 years, that's meaning that you've done your job, but you also get excited. And, in Mississippi, in the Delta, those players didn't mature like other players. In the state of Texas, and I used to tell Mac Brown this all the time, Mac, the first 25 or 20 kids you signed, the last 5 are going to be better than all of those players, because the kids start out in the 4th grade and they may be overdeveloped by the time they're in the 9th grade or 10th grade. Then you have other players that are just starting to develop in the 9th or 10th grade, but you've already used up all your scholarships. And, he said, you're probably right. But, being able to recruit players, develop players, and it hasn't changed. We all want the 5-star or 4-star, but tell me of anybody that rates a player for those what different services that actually ever played the game or even knows how to evaluate a player.
Yeah, it's a very difficult. The movie Moneyball, about Billy Beane in the Oakland A's. There's a scene where Brad Pitt is having a little bit of an argument with one of the scouts, and the scout has a slick hair back. I can't remember the character's name in the movie, but Brad goes, "You don't know. You just don't know. You don't know if this kid's going to pan out or not. You don't know. You want to know, but it's so difficult to work that out. But you as a football player and a coach, and a guy who's been an organizer of all of this, you try to put the best possible scenario in front of a young player to go, here's your food, here's where you're going to stay. Yeah, you're going to have to go to classes, but here's where you're going to work out, and we're going to give you everything that you possibly can to develop into the best player you could possibly be while you're here. That's part of what you do.
Yes, and if you have the people, what I always did with the coach, they had to, whoever had that area, develop, identify the players. Then he had to show their position coach that film. Then the defensive or offensive staff would watch that film. And then we as a total staff would watch the film. So we got pretty good of evaluating kids because we did all the time. Well, one thing I did, and did it 4 times a year, I would have our staff evaluate our whole football team. Meaning, and back then we used red, blue, and white. Now you would use stars, but the blue player was the best player, the red player, and then the white. And you would list those, and everybody on the staff would evaluate all the players. So you'd put them together, and you also would put down the coach that recruited that player. So I didn't have to say this coach recruited 4 blue players or this coach recruited 10 white players. They were able, because you gave it to them on a sheet of paper, and they knew which coach was actually the best evaluator because he came in as a white, but right now he's a red or a blue player.
Yeah, interesting. Jackie, you brought up an interesting point to me. Well, when is the day that you don't recruit? Is there any one day? Is it Christmas Day that you're not recruiting? Is it New Year's? Is it Arbor Day? You're recruiting 24/7, aren't you?
Yes, but back then you had the opportunity to recruit the kids' parents, to recruit the kids' minister, to recruit. You got a true evaluation of it. Today, unfortunately, the coaches have to go through an agent to talk through a player. You don't call the parent. You don't go see the parent. You're calling, and that's why Nick left. He got tired of, he wasn't going to deal with agents.
I didn't realize it was that. I thought it was some other things that were changing in the game so quickly that this isn't fun for me like it used to be. This isn't a challenge. Let me ask you real quick while you're talking about the recruiting process. Did you ever talk to a janitor? I've heard stories about you talk to the guy that cleans up the floor and says, you know what, that kid, he picks up trash around here where nobody else does. He's something special.
I wanted the parents, the girlfriend, I wanted the minister, I wanted the aunts and uncles, the teachers, the principal, and the janitor.
Yeah.
I did it back when we had Prop 48. That meant that you could recruit a kid, but he wasn't eligible until he passed enough hours. But you had to score. I would go back to the first grade. And anybody's listening to this, and if you have kids, you want to go to the first grade and get all their records from the first grade all the way up, all their test scores. On the national testing, they're all judged on the number of tests, and they're all the same, meaning all the English, all the math, all the tests are standardized. But on the back side, if you flip it, it would give you the score. But there's three columns. One is below average, average, above average. And you could put all of them together from the first grade through the 12th, and they all will almost be identical. You don't give, a kid is born with intelligence. going to first grade, second grade, third grade, fifth grade is not going to make that much difference in a kid's intelligence. So I would use those to see if the kid was going to pass his test or not.
Well, Vincent, if Jackie had tested my first and second grade scores, I never would have been able to play for the man. I wouldn't have the ability to do it. Oh my gosh, I love this. This is fantastic.
Well, it also gave you, you could tell if something drastic happened in the kid's life.
Yes.
Right.
Because his scores would drop drastically.
Okay.
And I had one kid, which he's a coach today, great success. And so in the fourth or fifth grade to the seventh grade, he plummeted. And I asked him what happened. He said, I joined the gang. My next question was, did they let you out? And if the question is yes, that meant he had something that they let him out, some reason
Right.
that he was going for him. If he had said no, then you don't recruit him.
Right.
But he came in, was a great player.
Yeah.
And
And you never know, do you, Jackie? You lose a parent or something happens. People have tragedies in their life. That doesn't mean they can't play. And I want to be careful how I said that. I was just teasing when I was going, my past, but your ability to tell a story and to build off of the information that you're able to gather allows you to treat players with a little more uniqueness in how you handle them from a disciplinary standpoint, or how you motivate them, or how you don't motivate them. Is there some correct portions of what I'm talking about there?
Well, I was one of the first coaches that psychologically tested the players.
Okay.
We had a guy out when I was at A&M. He took the test on a computer, typewriter or a computer. And it was amazing how the information that he would give me back that identified the player. And I had Bucky Richardson is a young man that was a freshman. We were redshirting him. He wasn't going to play. And we were playing Southern Miss in Jackson, Mississippi, and Brett Favre was a freshman. And they're going to beat us. They're ahead of us in the fourth quarter, like 2 minutes to go. And I told the coaches to put Bucky in. They said, you can't do that. I said, well, I just did. And he couldn't find his helmet. He put somebody else's helmet on to go play. But Bucky, the very first play, he went 84 yards for a touchdown. And then won the conference, took us to the Cotton Bowl. But if I had not psychologically tested the players, and the starting quarterback came back that he could not handle pressure. And so that stuck in my mind, and that's why I put Bucky Richardson in the game.
And you put them in and they thrive. How amazing, right? You know enough about the kid and are able to put them in situations where they absolutely can do their best, and good things happen from that.
Well, the best test out there today is called MMPI-2, and they use it for a lot of different reasons. Sleep apnea is one, but other things. And it in detail can give you about the players. When I would test the players, I would keep the information. I never gave it to the assistant coaches because I didn't want to taint or put the player in a bad light to anybody. But I used the information to help the player.
Interesting. Yeah, using science and obviously when you're at universities, there's people that are gathering data and researching and all of that, be able to use it to your advantage. Well done, Jackie. Good job. I think that one, you create a better football team in many respects, but more importantly, you create a better student athlete and a youngster that can be of better benefit to himself and his teammates because of your ability to understand certain things about them that put them in the right place at the right time. Correct?
Yes, and you need to, and that's what I have to give credit to Nick for. Nick was one of the top in the country that had people come in, talk to the players, people come in and give the players, as a coach, as a parent, as a boss, you have to give your players more than X's and O's. You have to give your kids more than a roof and food and clothes. And if you're the boss, you got to give them more than a paycheck. So those are the things that you really need to understand. If you're building a team and coaching, you give your players, and Nick did. Nick brought people in all the time. And, the players may not, and Coach Bryant, you can go back to Coach Bryant, yes, but you may not like him all the time. And I always would tell the players, I'm not your friend, and you're not my friend. And Coach Bryant, you wasn't his friend, and he wasn't your friend. But when you got through playing for him, and you understand this as a player, you would love the coaches that did those things to you, with you, and for you.
Yep. You value what their lessons in life are, and hopefully take that, even if you don't play football. I use the example, the Players Association gave out a statistical research paper that was done on 67, 68, 69 Green Bay Packers versus the 84, 88 New York Jets and Giants. And the Packers were successful businessman, millionaire here, owner of a business there, owner of a corporation, vice president of this, countless examples of the discipline that they learned that carried over into their next life in many ways. It's just fascinating doing that comparison. I know you have a hard stop, Jackie. I want to be respectful of that.
Yeah.
Before we go, though, I know that you and your involvement with former teammates and players has been well above board. I'd like you to visit just a little bit about what you're doing, not to pat yourself on the back. We'll do that for you. My applause for you doing this, but something that you've taken upon yourself to go, you know what, I can and I will do something to help my friends and some of my former players. Talk a little bit about how you're involved with their health and making sure that we can make their lives better.
Well, there's a company called Celtex Therapeutics, Houston, Texas, and the CEO, former, now the CEO is Anita Perry, Governor Perry's wife, allowed me to take former players and be able to provide therapy, MSCs, mesenchymal stem cells therapy, and from ALS to dementia to Parkinson's to a autoimmune polymyalgia to shoulders, knees, backs, and as well as hips, and being able to make a difference in their quality of life. And it's as a former teammate or former coach that's really has given me the opportunity to help other players.
One of the things that I think is amazing now, we mentioned this just before we went on the air. You played with Joe Namath, and Joe hurt his knee. I think it was his junior year. He said that his right knee was running to his left. He plants his foot in the ground, and it was a non-contact injury. But the way they took care of knee injuries back then is completely different than the way that they do now. Share a little bit of now. Logan put up for us. There's a phone number that you can call. What some of the advantages are if you're feeling poorly, if you just not just because you're old, but there might be something wrong. Tell us how Celtex can assist in some respects to where people would want to call and do some research to find out a little bit more about how they can help themselves.
Well, real quick for me, I had rotator cuff tear in 91 surgery. I had the left one in 14, 15 right in there. I had stem cells in my left, and it is stronger than my right. I'm going to have to get my right re-op or another operation. But I didn't have to and don't have to in my left. So there's today when we talk about MSCs, it's the fountain of youth regenerative medicine. And today you're talking about, and you can go, the best way to do this is go on clinical trials, that's with a S.gov, and then put any issue that you have and / stem cell therapy. And it will give you all the clinical trials in the world. It will also give you the results of the clinical trial. And that's the best place to research and to make a decision, whatever you have, Parkinson's or autoimmune or, dementia, go on. If there's research out there, there's clinical trials that will give you the information that you're looking for.
Yep. And they're not always going to be the cure for cancer, but at least a better quality of life if you are dealing with some situations.
Well, yeah, cancer is one that there's a lot of camps. There's one camp that says that MSCs are signals that they go and say, wake up the dormant cells, MSCs. The other one says they go in and they regenerate, and whether it's bone, tissue, or whatever. But the cancer cell and MSCs, that's one thing that after you get completely cured of the cancer, then there are places and people that will use the MSCs to rebuild your autoimmune. But I wouldn't advise to treat. Celtex does not treat cancer patients, and it's not, and the doctors are the ones that treat, not Celtex. They just make the product.
Yes, understood completely. And folks that are watching and listening, this is a way for you to learn more about not only how your body works, but how people are working in the medical field to try to enhance your quality of life with scientific advances today that didn't exist just a few years ago, let alone when all of us were born and raised. Jackie, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you have a hard stop here. We didn't talk about Pitt. We didn't talk about Mississippi State or A&M. Would there be a possibility of having you back on sometime?
So for you two guys, I'd love to.
Well, that's not for Logan, I guess. All right, Vincent, we're going to have to work on that just a little bit. But thank you so much for your time. And again, we know that you have other things that you need to do. So, ladies and gentlemen, what a great honor it's been for us to have Jackie Sherrill, and we will honor that invitation, and we will talk about coaching national championships and turning programs around both in Mississippi and, of course, in Texas. And what a pleasure it has been for us to have you on. Final words, Jackie, anything from you?
No, thank you very much. And, I relish and applaud all the coaches and players that today. And, it is not an easy path. And most players, and you're one of them, that start, they're thinking about going on and playing in pro ball. But very few ever get that opportunity. So my last words, if you're playing sports, enjoy it.
Hey, Hawk.
Please.
I want to say this to Coach Sherrill. We need to do this.
Well, thank you, and you guys stay healthy.
We will. Thank you so much for being a part of the show today. Jackie Sherrill, our special guest here, and you heard it. We'll hold him to the commitment. We do want to talk about national championships at Pitt, and we want to talk about his other experiences. He's got his daughter Bonnie has written a book that we want to talk about as well. So many other different things, but we do need to let him go right now. So for Vincent Turner, for Logan Landers, and for our special guest here, Jackie Sherrill, I'm Harper LaBelle saying thank you for tuning in to 100 Yards of Football today, everybody. We've had a great show. We appreciate you being a part of it. Have a fantastic rest of your day.